What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another modern video. And it's been a while since we've taken a look at this classic modern deck, so I felt like it was about time that we kind of revisit it. Also gives me a reason to get some gameplay of it later because it's always just kind of satisfying, and we'll of course get into that here once we take a look at the deck and everything. So let's go ahead, we're going to take a look at Burn for the modern format and exactly what it offers to the current metagame, where we're looking at a lot of people still playing like Murktide, still one of the most popular decks. Hammer Time still being a very popular deck in the format, and Creativity actually taking over as like one of the most played decks in the format. But of course, before we get into that, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing and ringing the notification bell so you know when videos like this get posted. Also, if you go into the description of this video, there are two links. One goes to the Discord server that I run. Go ahead, follow that link, and go ahead and join. And on top of that, there's a link to my Twitch channel, so you can go over there and follow me so you get notifications when I go live as well. Usually playing Magic, maybe playing some other video games and stuff too when, I just get the feeling for it. So, Burn is as old as time. I mean, you've kind of like seen mono red decks being like these super aggressive decks, and Burn is definitely considered one of those aggressive decks, but it's aggressive in different ways, as it's not playing like 25, 30 creatures and like a few spells that help you to push through damage. It is essentially more burn heavy than it is creatures. So the creatures are super aggressive for their own rate. In the case of Goblin Guide, Monastery Swiftspear, Eidolon the Great Revel essentially it does more damage over the long term with its effect rather than it doing the damage itself. So, first looking at Goblin Guide. Goblin Guide is a 1 mana 2/2 with haste, and when it attacks the defending player, it reveals the top card of the library. If it's a land card, that player puts it into their hand. Essentially, this was supposed to be like a downside to the card, is essentially like has a chance of having your opponent draw a card, and with the full all 10 fetch lands being legal in the format and other ways to kind of manipulate the top of the deck, Goblin Guide is technically a worse card than it was like a few years ago, but it's still very powerful as like a 1 mana 2/2 with haste. It gets in a ton of damage. Plays on turn one, chances are it's getting 4-6 points of damage in. And when essentially this deck is wanting to deal as much damage as possible with every card that it has, while the creatures are not a higher number than the spells, the creatures are super important because they have that potential to deal more damage over the course of a game. And so Goblin Guide usually gets in, at least 2-3 times. 1 mana deals 6 damage is very, very good and very efficient for this sort of deck. On top of that, you have Monastery Swiftspear, which starts out as like a 1 power creature. Playing on turn one, it's obviously not nearly as good hitting for 1 instead of 2 with Goblin Guide, but the fact that you are playing a ton of spells means that you can play a Swiftspear, and then like on turn 2, even if you're just like playing like another spell, like if you're trying to tempo with like Searing Blaze, or you have like Lava Spike, you're going to be hitting for 3 and essentially get back up to the amount of damage you would have dealt with a Goblin Guide. Also, sort of kind of getting to be able to protect it. If your opponent has like their own damage base removal, we know Lightning Bolt and Unholy Heat are popular in the format. So just with that, you could cast like a Lightning Bolt or something like that on the end of your opponent's turn. And if they don't have a Delirium to Unholy Heat, they're not going to be able to kill the Swiftspear if you save like a Lightning Bolt, which can work out in your favor a lot of times if you're just trying to save your burn. Maybe you can't get aggressive with Swiftspear, so on. And if they have like a lightning bolt, it's very possible to have 2 different bolt 3 damage effects like lightning bolt, and that's probably really it. But getting to do that, even hitting like multiple lands and being able to like Boros Charm your opponent lightning bolt gets the Swiftspear out of range for your opponent's lightning bolt and getting in tons of damage as well. Eidolon of the Great Revel, with Murktide still being a popular deck and like Hammer and stuff like that, playing an Eidolon, this card could just deal 4, 6, 8 points of damage to your opponent if they're not able to deal with it. And a lot of the removal spells in the format that would deal with Eidolon also cause your opponent to take 2 damage from it. So while obviously paying 2 mana to just deal 2 damage to your opponent is not ideal, Eidolon of the Great Revel is pretty good, when your opponent has to cantrip to find that removal spell. So dealing 4 to them for 2 mana is pretty on rate for this deck in terms of some of the other spells it plays in the deck. But if it gets to deal any more than 4 damage, it ends up being very, very good. And of course, like it also gets to attack as well. So if your opponent's not really adding to the board at all, or you're able to kind of tempo them out with something like your own burn spells, Eidolon can just deal out damage Goblin Guide or Monastery Swiftspear. So while it's definitely not the floor is definitely a lot lower than like Goblin Guide or Monastery Swiftspear. The ceiling is miles ahead, I believe, of at least a Swiftspear. I think it might just be the worst creature in the deck, just the fact that like you need more spells to do more damage. And while Goblin Guide, you just kind of get the immediate satisfaction. And on average, I believe that the Goblin Guide will deal more damage and be more relevant in a lot of situations, just naturally having that extra point of power rather than needing a spell to back up having the extra power. So we keep talking about these spells. What the heck are they? We have a bunch of lightning bolts, lava spike and lightning bolt. Essentially, like the true bolts, lava spike just getting to deal 3 damage to a player straight up for 1 mana. Lightning bolt getting to deal 3 damage to any target. Usually goes to the face. Rift Bolt and Skewer the Critics being the honorary Lightning Bolt cards. Skewer the Critics, you need to have dealt damage to your opponent, or your opponent has had to have lost life that turn for you to cast a 1 mana Skewer the Critics, which deals 3 damage to any target. And Rift Bolt, you have to suspend it for 1 red and essentially wait to your next turn. This does have some benefit to it, where like if you do have like those heavy Swiftspear draws, you could like play Swiftspear on turn 1, play another Swiftspear, suspend a Rift Bolt, and then like your damage output for the next turn is going to be so much because this is going to be dealing 3 damage to your opponent. You're going to get some prowess triggers, and you still have 2-3 mana to do with whatever to really pump up the jams with Monastery Swiftspears. So can be very good. Kind of sucks to wait 1 turn to do it, but again, is 1 mana, deal 3 damage on a card. Very good. Always going to have that kind of upside to and a little bit higher of a ceiling when combined with multiple Monastery Swiftspears. Of course, can be cast for 3 mana, just like Skewer the Critics, if you just need that damage like right away. The 2 drops, you have Boros Charm. Boros Charm is essentially just like the staple of the deck. Just deals 4 damage straight up to a player or planeswalker. Could potentially protect like your creatures, like maybe if you have a more creature heavy draw, Boros Charm can just protect your creatures by giving them making them indestructible. The not so used mode is giving a target creature double strike. Really, you're going to have to like have a huge Swiftspear for Boros Charm double strike to actually matter, or if your opponent has like protection or like hexproof or something like that, like you can Boros Charm like one of your creatures and essentially get the amount of damage that Boros Charm would have done, and sometimes even more as well. Lightning Helix not played in as high of a number, and kind of for good reason. Like gaining 3 life is not, I believe, as good as it usually is in this format where people are playing like Archons, one-shotting you with hammers and just like making giant Murktides and whatever to and essentially end the game over the course of like a turn or two. While there is probably some cases where like gaining 3 life comes up, uh, Lightning Helix just, being 2 mana, 3 damage, instant speed, with the slight upside of gaining life is okay. That's why you only see it in like 2 copies, and you see like the playset of Boros Charm, and then people playing the playset of Searing Blaze. So Searing Blaze for 2 mana deals 1 damage to a player and 1 damage to target creature that player controls. It's not great. That's not great. The reason why it's great is because of landfall, where you essentially get to deal 3 to a player and 3 to a creature instead. 3 is going to take out plenty of creatures in the format. Hammer definitely has a lot of 2 toughness creatures, and you have the creativity decks that play a bunch of 1 toughness creatures that you can just kill straight up with Searing Blaze without having to have the land drop. Obviously, again, better if you have it. Also, the fact that it will kill Fable tokens with the land drop, and just kind of so on with that. You have a lot of the creatures in the Murktide deck that end up dying to this card. Really, like half the creatures that they end up playing. But it's just a very good removal spell. It essentially lets you get a threat off the board, an early threat off the board, while also maintaining the pressure, dealing 3 damage to your opponent, and also getting in with whatever creature you end up having in play. Two Skull Crack. Players can't gain life this turn. Damage can't be prevented. Deal 3 damage to target player. I never posted the video, and I really should have because it is actually like a good lesson and like at least some of the utility for Skullcrack. If your opponent is able to prevent all damage that would be dealt to them by sources like you control, so on and so forth, stuff like that, Skullcrack will stop it. So a quick lesson in Magic: can't override can. So if a card tells you you can't do something, and then a card tells you that you can do something, you can't do the thing. So if your opponent says that they can prevent damage from sources you control as the player, and then I have something that says that damage can't be prevented, then the damage can't be prevented and things happen as normal. So there's like that slight upside. It really only matters for like say the Enchantress deck and stuff like that that can kind of give you protection. Skullcrack, I believe, also can get around the new 1 mana spell that like the Hammer decks and everyone else just seems to play, and I always seem to get blown out by. Uh, that of course I can't remember the name of it. It's one of the new cards from the set, but I believe it gives your creatures like your opponents or whatever protection from black and from red. So like if your opponent's like expecting to like do this, you just skull crack in response. You know, if you're targeting them with a spell, then obviously it's going to fizzle. But if they're trying to like kill one of your creatures in combat, they will be sad when they don't really have protection from it because protection prevents damage dealt to something of whatever it has protection from, and damage not being prevented stops that from happening, so they will get damaged. So just something to know. Pretty deep in this video as well, so there's your lesson for the day. Mana base super simple. You have 6 fetch lands, Bloodstained Mire and Arid Mesa. You have a Fiery Islet and 4 Sunbaked Canyons. These are just lands that end up turning into cards later. You have Inspiring Vantage, which is an early land that comes into play untapped. Not dealing damage to you either, helping you kind of win the races and like mirrors and other aggressive decks. You have Sacred Foundry, a dual land that you can fetch up with like one of your fetch lands, and Mountains because obviously most of your deck is red mana symbols. And a lot of time, like these lands can just fetch up the mountain and save you a point of damage while also thinning out the deck. Sideboard, Path to Exile. I mean, this deck really doesn't care. Like the games that go long, they're probably losing anyway. So like Path to Exile, just getting a creature out of the way and getting to push damage is a lot more useful to them rather than just say like playing Prismatic Ending or something like that, or like March of Otherworldly Light, where they really don't have like the mana or the lands to do so. Just an efficient removal spell for them that does exactly what they want to do. Deflecting Palm, if your opponent's just trying to win with like a giant creature, you can essentially just send that damage back to them. Usually you see these like against like Emeralds and stuff, your opponent gets to a low life total, then you Deflecting Palm them and they get 15, stuff like that. You have Whirling Vortex, which can come in against like the Rhinos and like some of the Cascade decks, because when a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, deals 5 damage to that player. Works against like the Elementals as well, just getting to ding your opponent for 5, for them to try to like endurance you or try to do some of their bullshit shenanigans looking at you, scam decks. You can also make it so your opponents can't gain life this turn, essentially like turning off like Omnaths and things like that. Unfortunately, at the cost of like 1 mana, but you're also getting to deal damage to them and cast some of your other spells as well. Additional Skull Cracks, Smash the Smithereens, kind of giving you that tempo against like some of the artifact decks that you see popping up in the format. And, of course, keep the pressure by getting to deal 3 damage to Artifact's controller. And Wear Tear because Leyline of Sanctity really sucks to play against, and you just want a way to be able to deal with it. Also, getting to destroy like a bridge if you need to be able to push the last points of damage in. And so that is Burn for the modern format. Really inexpensive deck. The deck that I always point to if people want to sort of play like on a budget, just because a lot of like the fetch lands in here in particular do translate to some of the other decks in the format. You always can use like lightning bolts and things like that. Any of the like fast lands or whatever. Like the whole mana base of this is pretty good, and like the rest of the main deck is like super cheap. Like really a lot of your money is baked, for lack of a better term, in the mana base and stuff. So yeah, that is the video. That is it for Burn. If you guys enjoyed, please consider leaving a like, Comment down below if there's any other modern decks that you would like to see me kind of show off in any of the videos coming up. And of course, go down to the links in the description of this video as well. Go check those out. That's going to do it for me. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next video.